Hello, assalamu alaikum, namaste, sat sri akal, assalamu alaikum. My name is Farheen Khan and you're watching the Azeeza show. Today we're actually going to talk about women in leadership. And with me are my guests, Agapi, Gessesse, Saima Malik, and Sadaf Parvaiz. Thank you so much for being here.
That's right. Thanks.
Wonderful. So I want to just sort of jump right into it. So what, did you all, you've all have very different positions that you sort of hold within, society and community. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are so our audience knows? You want to start?
Sure, I can start. So Saima Malik, I have over 18 years of experience in the digital and tech space. I've had sort of various different roles, starting in consulting and working for other technology companies. I currently work for a bank right now in the digital space. I'm also really, really passionate about women in leadership and women in tech, and also feel, considering the experience that I have, that I really want to give back. And so I do that through a number of organizations where I not only mentor young women, but I also am recently starting up a program that actually helps build that leadership capacity specifically for Muslim women.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great. Welcome.
So Sadaf Parvaiz, I have been at a professional services firm here on Bay Street for the last 15 years, but my career has been varied. It started out in the auditing space, so I'm a CA by background, but now I'm a director of diversity and inclusion. So my day job is actually around ensuring equity for the people that work in our organization, and ensuring that women in particular, but also any sort of marginalized group has equitable access to leadership opportunities, and that the systemic barriers within the organization have been addressed as well. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I work as an executive director at an organization that helps young people get into fields and training in gaps in the labor market. So the trades, digital tech, kitchen type of jobs. And so I've done that for a number of years, and I was an ED at another organization, but I've really started my career in the social service sector, and I've built that as frontline worker and moved on, obviously to reach where I am, but I'm extremely passionate about seeing young people's lives change. I work specifically with young people, and women in that space as well is very important to me, that they feel empowered to do what they want to do, and that we can empower them to do that.
Wonderful. So, everybody has a journey, and there's a path that we all take, and sometimes we think we know where we're going and we end up somewhere else, and sometimes, we know where we're going and we end up where we want to. So Saima, tell us about your story. Did you always know that you wanted to actually be in the digital space?
No, actually, my background, I graduated from university with an accounting degree.
Okay.
And I actually kind of accidentally fell into an opportunity to intern at a consulting agency company. And, after I had a little sort of snippet of that space, it was, I wasn't going back. The numbers were not for me. And I was just really excited about all these new opportunities that were happening with the internet and e-commerce.
Right.
And that journey has continued with me and evolved in lots of different capacities, starting at sort of the bottom and doing the work, to now as a leader and setting strategy and helping support the bank in all the work they're doing in the digital space and transformation. So it's definitely been an evolution as a leader, and starting from the bottom.
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful. What about you, Sadaf?
So for me, I started out in the auditing space, and I graduated with an accounting degree as well. But 4 or 5 years in, I was given an opportunity to cover a mat leave position, and I thought I was only going to cover the maternity leave and go back to my auditor role. But I've always been passionate about women and women's development, and most big organizations nowadays have these employee networks. So I was already part of the professional women's network at my company, and so I thought, well, I don't have an HR background. I've never done anything in this space. Why would I be qualified? And I think, I had people around me that pushed me and said, yeah, but you have the right skill set. And even though you don't have the technical training, the HR background, you have the passion for it. And so I did it for the 1 year mat leave and fell in love with the role. And my career took a totally different twist. And I've been in this space, the diversity and space, ever since. And so my dad always says, well, why'd you do your CA? But if I hadn't gotten that CA and I wasn't there at the right time, I would
Right.
never have been given this opportunity.
For sure,
So
for sure.
in that sense, it has opened a lot of doors.
Amazing. That's great. What about you?
It's interesting because I always was taught as a young person, my parents would say, oh, well, if you want to help people, there's no money in that. So like, just put that aside. And so my first like full-time salary job was actually at a bank. And I was like, I'm going to help people become financially free. Like that's what I'm going to do. Silly me. But I would always, after work, I used to call it my 5 to 9 job. I'd always volunteer and I'd always go and give back to community because that's where my heart was. But I was like, it's not really a viable option, or I didn't see it at the time. But I actually entered into a program that United Way had called City Leaders, which is kind of how we and Farheen know each other.
That's right.
And I think that really opened my eyes because I had never really knew what the United Way did, and I never thought of the social service sector on that scale. I always just thought very grassroots. And I went there, and there are people who are directors and VPs, and they look well-to-do to me. And so through that program, I discovered, oh no, this is actually, I could actually make a living off of doing my passion. And so I kind of traded and flipped it and made my, my 5 to 9 job, my 9 to 5, not so much my 9 to 5, but yeah, so that's kind of how I fell into it. It was always been my passion.
Very cool. Well, I think, for me, like my thing was that, when I was growing, I had to start working very young. So I was 16 when I started working full time because I needed to help my family financially. And so, when I was younger, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a doctor, or I'm going to be a journalist, or I'm going to be, a school teacher or something, right? And when it actually came down to it, I was like, okay, well, I have to make that decision to say, okay, well, I can't currently go to the type of job that I want, or I can't pursue my post-secondary education. So I need to actually put that aside, start working sort of the, 9 to 5, so to speak, call center type job, so that I can just, make ends meet, and then slowly build up to, what I need to do. So, and then for me, like, that's what sort of took me on this whole different path, because I was in the call center, just another agent like everybody else. Suddenly somebody saw something in me, and then I started to move up the ladder. I got into corporate communications, and then realized, like you, that there was some, viable options in the not-for-profit side of things, because I was dealing with some health issues, and after 9/11 I was attacked. So physically for me, it was like, okay, well, I was dealing with a lot of emotional stuff too, and it's like, how do I sort of marry my work in terms of corporate communications and marketing into something that actually supports women that have dealt with some of these issues, right? So that's kind of how I shifted into not-for-profit. And so I've been there since. So it's very interesting, right? But I know personally, like, the kinds of challenges I've had to deal with. So what sorts of challenges have you, as women sort of coming into these positions of leadership had to deal with?
Sometimes there's these informal networks that you need to navigate, and unfortunately, some of them are systematic. Things like the Old Boys Network, or accessing certain opportunities because you sort of don't a friend of a friend, and that's how you access those types of things. So I think those are some of the things, and the glass ceiling still definitely exists. So it's not like it's gone away. I think the opportunity that you have, though, is working through some of those things systematically in the organization that you're in, through some programs that Sadaf has at her program, and I actively participate for the organization that I work with, and we're able to transform not only some of those systematic components, but the most important is the mindset and the culture. And so I think there's an opportunity there, but I also think as you move up the ladder and you're a woman, you really have an opportunity to influence, given sort of the position you're in, and I think we really need to harness that and take advantage of that. So I'm also a really big believer of mobilizing leader of leaders among women, to help sort of bridge that network and make some of those changes collectively, whether it's in corporate or community.
Okay, wonderful.
I mean, I've had the opportunity to even coach women who are really high performers at my organization. And one of the biggest things through my coaching and through some of the programs we deliver that we see is studies have shown that women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. So a lot of times women think they have people who have their back, who are going to go to bat for them, who are going to advocate for them. But they're, and I'm not saying it's not good to have mentors. Obviously mentors are there to support you when you're having a bad day, or or like help you with career advice. They can be internal or external to the organization, but within your organization for your own career, it's really important, and I try to tell people to be mindful about their career and figure out who is sponsoring them. And so by sponsor, for those who don't really know the difference between sponsorship and mentorship, sponsorship is people who stand in front of you. Mentors will stand beside you, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
this is someone who's literally willing to, put their name beside your name for a promotion. So like, for example, at our organization, there's a partnership evaluation, right? And someone literally has to sign a form that says, I think this person is worthy of being a partner at this organization.
I'm going to stop you right there. Sorry. We're going to take a quick break and I want to continue this conversation. Okay, we'll be back in a minute. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Azeeza show. We were just talking to Sadaf. Sadaf, you were talking about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship.
Yeah, and I think so. A lot of times, I can remember I just did a session where I asked everyone in the room to put their hand up who thought they have a sponsor, and 90% of the people in the room put their hand up. And then when I described the difference between mentor and sponsor and said, now how many people think they have a sponsor? Most of those hands went down.
Right.
So for women in particular, the importance of having a sponsor is important because a lot of times women are put on a path that is a little bit more, internal roles, not the biggest accounts or clients of the organization. And once you're on that path, it doesn't lead to moving up the ranks because you do need to have public company experience, for example, in our organization, or you need to have worked on a prospectus, or there's certain characteristics that no matter how good a worker you are, if you don't have those in your portfolio or in your background, it just, that glass ceiling comes quick.
Right.
So a sponsor is someone who will say, no, Saima has like the ability to manage this client, and I'm going to put her on that client so that she's on the level playing field. And when promotion time comes up and Saima and Sam, let's say, are being considered, we can say, Saima's also worked on a public company. That's not going to hold her back from the promotion. So that's what I've seen time and time again, is that women need to really determine whether they have a sponsor and navigate to get a sponsor by, really doing good work and figuring out, who has the political capital and someone that.
And do you think a lot of organizations are willing to do that, like to be like, or individuals who would be willing to become sponsors?
Yeah, maybe some.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are. I think that you definitely, from experience I can speak, you actually have to make people aware of the work that you're doing. So you actually have to be really, really comfortable about talking about the work you do, and essentially, letting people know all the great work you do. So sometimes we kind of go ahead and just get the work done, and it's a very sort of female sort of trait to just say good hard work counts. But guess what? You actually have to talk about it. You have to showcase it. You have to go make sure the right people know the work that you've been doing, because you may end up in a situation where you're doing really great work, but no one knows about it. So it's really important in an organization, in order to build sponsorship and mentorship, to actually essentially build a sell sheet and sort of make sure that you're talking about the work you do, and that's how you gain sponsorship and mentorship.
But I think that for Muslim women, and a lot of Muslim women that I mentor have said, yeah, but our religion talks about being humble, and like it feels inauthentic to be basically bragging about myself, like look what I did here yesterday, and I ran this panel the other day. So it's also being sensitive to having the organization understand that there may be some hidden gems. I feel like it's like a two-way street. I don't always feel like the women have to do all the work. I think there's now, to culture change, like when we're in a position of influence, we should start asking people to consider not the usual suspects. Did you consider, someone who isn't a braggart but has done the work? So starting to push the envelope there, because a lot of times it's not comfortable for people, and we do need to do our part on getting more comfortable of doing it in a less bragging way, if I can say that, but still, make it aware that you're ambitious and you do want to work on big clients and things like that, without feeling like you're being cheesy or.
It's true, although the only comment I'd say is that I think sometimes it comes really easily to some of the guys, where females sort of tend to stay back. So it's finding that balance, even as a female.
I would even say, just as a woman of color in leadership, what I've struggled with, especially in my you know, I think the first time I was in ED, I think I was 26 years old. So like entering into that realm, it was very intimidating. And I entered into a field that was predominantly, it was a charity that helped young people break into the media and film industry, but you dealt with media and film industry people. And I came from like airy-fairy, like, oh, let's hold hands and kumbaya, like feeling safe space. And that was not the case when I arrived. And so for me, I struggled with, well, I can't be too assertive because then they're gonna be like angry black woman syndrome, right? But I also have to, I won't be bullied, right? And so that was a really big challenge for me on how I could voice what I brought to the table, because a lot of the times, sometimes my work would be discredited or, okay, that's nice, but, you know, and it's just like, well, what I just did, like, saved us, you know? And so being able to find my voice in that and say, like, well, this is what we had before. This is what I've brought to the table, and like subtly, like you said, it let people know, you know, this was a gap that has now been filled, and it has been filled by me. We could move on to other things, but I think the subtlety in it is important, and I think women definitely, we need to start to speak to those things, because the modesty is one thing, but when our male counterparts are much louder and it comes naturally to them, you'll be left in the shadow for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a mom of 3, and so we made some choices in the beginning to have sort of paid help, I'd say, and we needed to do that because I really enjoyed working and I didn't want to stay home, quote unquote. Those were the choices that I made, but I also, you know, I did have a lot of family support, so my parents helped us out quite a bit. But I also want to be cognizant that there are other single moms out there, single dads out there who don't really have those type of support mechanisms. So I think we're very, very fortunate to have those, but you have to be aware that it's not available to everybody. But items like flex work help a lot in accommodating and adjusting for more of childcare or elder care. But I just think it's important to consider those factors also.
For sure.
Well, I don't have a family as of yet, but I will say that, I mean, I think the driving force for me in anything that I do is my mother passed away when I was 14 years old. And so that was like a really big turning point for me in life. And I think in everything that I do, I think like, okay, I always tell people sometimes, like, they're like, oh, carry these boxes. I'm like, my mother didn't come to the country for me to do that. That's where you need to do that for me. But I think that that's like a driving force for me, and my siblings and my, the friends that I have around me are all really supportive in the things that I do. And I think that I've created a support system around me of people who are like-minded. A lot of people just so happen to be in the same industry a lot of the time. And so those are people that I can pull on and ask for help when need be. But also just like my nieces, like hanging out with them gives me like balance and gives me like that sense of community or family.
Okay, well, thank you so much for, to all of you for being here. It was a pleasure to have a conversation.
Thank you.
I wish we had more time.
Yes.
So until next week, we'll see you then. Take care.